Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'll be ranking all 19 MUDs bundles in Star Trek Online as of November 27th of 2024. As always, chapters are listed down below if you want to skip ahead to discussion of any specific bundle, or to the final summary. Before I get too far into things, I have two quick notes to go over. First, this video is purely meant to rank the MUDs bundles, therefore I am assuming anyone watching understands what MUDs bundles are, their pricing structure, and how they work. But if you are not familiar and you want to learn, I do have a separate video from earlier this year that explains everything you need to know about MUDs bundles. It is linked in the description and the pinned comment down below. Second, as you can hopefully understand, with 19 bundles, I'm going to be providing a very rough overview of each of them. If you're looking for more information about any specific bundle, I do have dedicated breakdown videos for most of them, and I'll also be including a link to the STO wiki pages for them down below if you want to do some additional research. Next up, I want to explain the tier structure ranking criteria. So first, I'm going to be looking at the number and quality of ships that the bundle is offering. Second, the value of the associated ship gear, things like starship traits, consoles, weapons, and pets. Third, how important either the ship or gear is for various playstyles. And fourth, how likely I would be to recommend that bundle to a random player. And for how that translates to the tier structure, the S tier is going to be the best of the best. These are bundles that I feel confident recommending to anyone. They offer something that is going to benefit most playstyles. A tier is also still really good, but there are going to be situations where I'm going to be a bit hesitant to give them a blanket recommendation, perhaps due to something in there being a bit more niche or there being alternatives out there that are just easier to obtain nowadays. B tier is good for specific niche playstyles. For someone doing that specific thing, that's a good bundle. But for anyone else, it's a bit hard to justify. C tier is going to ramp that up. The bundles aren't necessarily bad, but you have to be really, really focused on that playstyle and looking for every last thing you can possibly get to really justify one of these bundles. And at D tier, there's nothing of value there. It's basically just for the theme. The first bundle I'll be looking at today is MUD's 32nd Century Legacy Choice Pack. This happens to be the newest bundle, and it's dropping on console the same day this video goes up, which is also the start of the Black Friday MUDs bundle sale. So this bundle contains the Kirk Battlecruiser, the Janeway Science Vessel, and the Courage Science Destroyer. And the issue that I had with this bundle is that there are alternative options out there that are either matching or beating these ships at a cheaper price. So for the Kirk, you've got the Typhoon Temporal Battlecruiser, which we all got for free. That is in some ways an upgrade over what the Kirk had to offer. For the Janeway, the Terran Trailblazer in the Zen store is basically the same thing. And for the Courage, the Kardashev Command Dyson Science Destroyer that we got earlier this year in the Zen store, to some people that would probably be an upgrade, dropping that second command seat for the Temporal. So I think you can see here the issue is, like, these aren't necessarily bad ships. It's just that there's alternatives out there that are going to be cheaper and easier for you to get. So for this bundle, it's not terrible, but it's also not one that really offers much value. So I'm going to put it into the C tier. The next bundle is MUD's As Seen on TNG Choice Pack, and this features the Borg Command Juggernaut, the Sona Science Dreadnought, and the Husnock Warship. Now for this, if you want to see any of the accessories, I have a video that is like 40 minutes long where I go in and show all of them off in a bit more detail. But this is a bundle I really have a hard time recommending nowadays. The accessories here aren't really anything to worry about, and the ships, compared to the modern offerings, they're not really that amazing. The Liberated Borg Command Juggernaut also happens to be one of the cheapest lockbox ships on the exchange because a bunch of people opened the Borg lockboxes to farm the DOF packs. There's a ton of supply for that ship and not much demand. The Sona Collector, that's just always had a really weak bridge officer setup. It's only got an ensign, temporal, and then a lieutenant commander intel. It was always a shame that ship never had the temporal on the commander. And for the Husnock, the Husnock I've rated as one of the better beam overload ships in the past, and it is still good. But the issue is that right in the Zen store, you've got ships like the Atlantis now, and That Atlantis is a really good DPS platform, especially for single target builds. So, just given how these ships have aged and the competition out there, this is another bundle that I really struggle to recommend. I certainly think that there's someone out there who, for their specific playstyle, might want to go for that board ship or the Sona, but this is not a bundle that I can really recommend to people. It's not terrible, but again, it's just nothing really that special. So for this bundle, we are going to put this into the C tier as well. Again, it's not the worst thing out there. It's just that you have to be specifically looking at one of these things in order for it to be worth it to you. Next up is Mud's Awesome Mix Volume 1. This features the Freedom Class Exploration Frigate, the Harold Vomf Dreadnought Carrier, the Zenkethi Shucked-In Frigate, and the Tholian Iktomi. So with this, if you're going for a pick 3 bundle, you're going to have to pick, just 3 out of the 4 ships. And the 3 I would go for is the Freedom, the Harold Vomf, and the Iktomi. And I'll explain why here in a moment. So for the Freedom, this is a ship that I think at one point was seen or was getting a bit of attention in PvP. I'm not sure if it still is, but for some that may be of interest there. The trait and the console from this, I believe, also saw some uses in a few situations. The console here is one of the few electrical damage buffs in the game. So if you're doing an Nadarian build, that might be something fun to play around with. For the Herald of Omp, this is more of just a fun platform. It's also just a really large ship. So if you're looking for a really big ship with 2 hangar bays, might be something to look at. For the Zenkethi Shucked In, the ship itself isn't really that good. This used to get a bit of attention though because of its experimental weapon. But that experimental weapon, the Protomatter Sheller, it's still fine, but there are better options out there. The Hexa Cannons from the Achilles, the Gold type that came out on the Cyclone. There's options for experimental weapons that are going to be cheaper and better. And the other ship here is the Tholian Iktomi. The ship itself isn't really that special, but the accessories on it are. The trade-off of this is very important for a lot of builds. Improve Photonic Officer. This makes your Photonic Officer have 100% uptime, and also gives you some buffs while Photonic Officer is active. Plus 25% bonus shield and hull healing, and plus 25% Cat 2 bonus exotic damage. So for survivability builds or for EPG builds, this is a really good trait to have access to. So this bundle, given that the accessories on it do have a bit more value, and some of the ships can be fun to fly, I'm going to go ahead and put this one into B tier as soon as I can find it here in all the ships. So we're going to put that one in B tier. It's not something that everyone needs to have, but there are certainly some play styles out there that will greatly benefit from you having some of those pieces. And next up is the Muds Carried Away bundle, which, as the name implies, is full of carriers. So this has the Zindi Aquatic Briostris, the Gem Dread, the Herald Cross, and the Tholian Joragumo. Now, for these ships, they're not bad, but they are clearly a bit dated with some of their stats. The only one here that has a full commander spec seat is the Tholian Joragumo, and it has no secondary spec seat because of that. But if you're a carrier fan, or if you're looking to do a theme build for any of those factions, then those ships may interest you. The Gem Dread with a bunch of Gem attack ship hangar pets out. That is pretty fun, though not the most effective. The Tholian Joragumo, its pets used to be really good for debuffing, but the Type 7s that came out on the Wani have very much lowered their value. And for the Zindi Aquatic Briostris, that for me has always just been a really fun ship to fly. So of the 4 ships here, the 3 that I'd recommend if you were going for a pick 3 bundle are going to be the Zindi Aquatic Briostris, the Gem Dread Carrier, and the Tholian Joragumo. The Herald Quas just doesn't really do much for me. And there's also some traits that come into play here. For the Tholian Joragumo, it has a Fire at Will extender called Precision Multi-Targeting. When you activate any target subsystem ability, it will give you Fire at Will 1 and plus 100 accuracy rating for 10 seconds. And the other trait that's going to be of interest here is on the Gem Dread. This is Dominion Coordination. When you hit Beam Overload, Surgical Strikes, or Cannon Rapid Fire, your pets that are within 10 kilometers will get a 33% damage buff. So if you're looking to buff up pets, that is a trait that might be of interest to you as well. So with this bundle, it's good, but it's not good enough to break into the higher tiers. So for this one, I'm going to put it into B tier. It's a solid set of ships, though they are starting to show their age. If we start to see some newer, better carrier platforms in 2025, then this might move down to a C tier. But right now, I think that this is still a fun bundle, so it's going into B tier. And next up is the Mud's Choice of Dread Through the Ages bundle, which contains the 23rd Century Dreadnoughts, the 26th Century Dreadnoughts, and the Marian Command Science Dreadnought. Now, this is the bundle that has the Atlas with the DPRM, the Enterprise J variants, and it's also the first bundle we're seeing in this video where there are selections that actually give you multiple ships from that one selection. So for the 23rd and 26th century options here, if you choose those, you're getting 3 ships from each of those selections. You're going to get 1 box in your inventory initially, and then, as I talk about in the Muds Bundle Guide, you just have to go to the Ships tab in the Muds Market, and then you can reclaim the box as many times as you need to get the rest of the ships. So that is an increased value there, and obviously the DPRM, that is a console that has had a very high value for pretty much its entire duration in the game. And while there are points where it's looked like it was about ready to fall out of the meta or be replaced by other things, it is still something that has managed to push through and hold on as something you see on most high-end builds, especially post-Vovin. So this is a console that, Goss did a good video on this. It is a nice buff. It's a nice survivability buff and damage buff, but it isn't going to instantly change your game. This is a really good console. It does help a lot, but don't expect this to take you from 100k to a million. There's a lot more that goes into DPS than swapping one console out. So it's good, but just keep in mind to temper expectations. It's going to help you out, just not to that extreme level. And as for the rest of the bundle, the other parts here I covered in the video I did on this earlier this year. And the other ships here, the Ant J variants, those ships aren't necessarily the best anymore, but they are still really fun to fly. They're some of the biggest ships in the game. And with that, you're getting the Fed, KDF, and Romulan variants, which are all really big ships. And for the third ship, that is the Marian Command Science Dreadnought. It's not a bad ship. It has a good trait for some playstyles, but for most people, that ship is not going to offer much to you. So my recommendation here for the pick 3 would be to get the 2 Dreadnought packs to get those 6 ships in total. And then probably go for the 2 Phoenix tokens if you're needing those. Otherwise, the T6 coupons. I mean, obviously, if you have a use for the Marian, then go for that as well. But if not, then either go for the Phoenix tokens or the T6 coupons. And as for where this is going to rank, it's probably not surprising to you, but this bundle is going to go into S tier because the DPRM still has very high relevance for a lot of builds. And the ships in here, while not necessarily the top performers, are still decent, and you may have some fun flying them around. Next up is Mud's Choice Pack of Dread, featuring the Herc Vedkrid, Tholian Tarantula, and the Paradox. So when I did my video back in 22 going over the bundles at the time, I ended up putting this pretty highly up in A tier, I believe. But the issue for it is these ships have not exactly aged the best. The only one that has a full commander spec seat is the Herc Vedkrid. And for the other ones, the spec combos they have, the command intel, that's fine. But there's better ships you can get nowadays that are going to be able to do the same thing these ships can do, but at a better performance level with better spec combos. So unfortunately for this bundle, it's still good for those of you that are, really wanting to do like a theme build on these specific ships. They're still very capable. But when it comes to putting it onto the tier list, I can't give it the same ranking I gave it last time. I got to move it down to C tier just because the ships are really starting to show their age, and there's no accessories that are really notable here. Next up is Mud's Cruiserweight, featuring the 23rd Century Ship Pack, which does have 3 ships in it: the Talus, the Temporal Connie, and the Temporal D7. Then we have the Jem'Hadar Light Battlecruiser and the Walker class light cruiser. So I want to focus on the Jem'Hadar and Walker first, and then we'll do an in-depth discussion on the 23rd. So for the Jem'Hadar Light Battlecruiser, this is one of the few ships in the game that happens to have dual commander seats, and one of them is a universal. So it is a fun ship to play around with. It is a bit light on the specialization seating, and even though it is Jem'Hadar, it does not have the Vanguard mechanic, but it is a fun ship to play around with. As for the Walker, it's not really that impressive stats wise, as you can see, just a lieutenant plus ensign spec combo. Yeah, it's 5-3, but that bridge officer setup is not the best out there. Now, for their accessories, these two do have some interesting items. The starship trait off the Jem'Hadar Light Battlecruiser is Obedience is Victory. When you use a team ability, so attack team, inch team, side team, or intel and pilot team, you will summon a Jem'Hadar attack ship to assist you for 20 seconds, and additional activations of team abilities will refresh the duration. So for those of you that like the pet summons type stuff, that might be a trait of interest to you. And the console off of this is the personal wormhole generator, which is an escape console, which might be of interest to those of you doing PvP. And for the Walker, the console off of this is one that I know for sure has been hated in PvP in the past. Doesn't have much value for PvE, but this is the obfuscation screen. Basically, you hit this and you cannot be killed or even targeted for 20 seconds, but you are also held in place, unable to hit anything. So it's an interesting console, but it is one that a lot of people are not big fans of. And for the 23rd Century ship pack there, well, the issue for that is, like with some of the other ships I've shown you today, there's alternatives out there that are going to be cheaper to get. For the Talus Temporal Warbird, the Legendary Valdor in the Legendary First Strike bundle is basically an upgraded version of it, and it even has a hangar bay, whereas the Talus does not. For the Constitution Temporal Light Cruiser, the Terran Cygnus Battle Cruiser, it's a little bit different in the Zen store, but I think that's close enough to warrant going for the cheaper option. And for the D7, the Atlantis Temporal Destroyer in the Zen store is just simply a better ship in the current state of the game. So, these ships aren't necessarily bad. It's just that there's newer options that do the same thing they do, just at a cheaper price point or better. So for where this bundle is going to end up, we're going to put Cruiserweight into B tier. It's not a bad bundle. There's still reasons to get it, but it's not hitting high enough to move up into the higher tiers, especially with those other ships out there that are coming in at a cheaper price point. Next up is Mud's Disco Inferno. This is the bundle that contains both Discovery Merc Worker Flight Deck Carrier variants, both the Constitution and the D7. In addition, it also has the Balu Sentry Ship and the Jovian Intel Heavy Raider. For the two Discovery Flight Deck Carriers, these are combined into one selection, and if you look at the stats here, you can see why. They're basically the same ship. The difference is the D7, being a KDF ship, does have an innate battle cloak, and the console and trait these two have are different. The Constitution has plot armor, which is truly a wonderful name. Polarized lattice optimized titanium armor, plot armor. It's an okay survivability buff, but it's not a trait that you would likely use in most endgame situations. And the D7 has a trait that most of you are probably very familiar with, the Ruin of Our Enemies. This is a trait that you will see on most high-end DPS builds. It is very good for AoE builds specifically. So CSV, Fire at Will, EPG, Torpedo, the Nadarian. And what this trait does is when you defeat a foe, it gives you a stack of this damage buff, which is plus 3% Cat 2 bonus all damage for 20 seconds, and stack up to 100 times, and each additional stack will reset the time for all the stacks you have. So it is possible to get up to 100 stacks. And every 5th defeat while the trait is slotted will give you some cooldown reduction. This is just a really good trait for high-end DPS builds that are using an AoE damage source. But if you're on single target like Beam Overload, Rapid Fire, or Surgical Strikes, this trait can still do okay, but its value is reduced because you're not able to get as many kills with those builds. And as for the stats of these two flight deck carriers, they're not perfect. There's ways that they could certainly be improved, that Lieutenant Command is doing nothing for you. But the reality is, when you look at the other flight deck carriers that have 5 forward weapons, there's not really anything better. The Zentaur, has a Lieutenant Commander command at least, so you can actually use it. But the issue with that is the Zentaur doesn't have access to as many isomags. So until we have better flight deck carriers come in that have 5 forward weapons, if you're looking for a flight deck carrier with 5 forward weapons, these are basically your best option right now. So with that, and the fact that these are also really nostalgic ships, and the fact that the D7 has a meta trait on it, it makes this an extremely desirable bundle before we even look at the other two ships. As for the Jovian, there's nothing it really offers. The Adamant in the Zen store is going to be a better ship for most people. And then for the Bottle Sentry, the ship itself isn't that great in my opinion, but it does have a console that people like, the Sentry mode. So this just makes you stationary and deploys these around you to do some anti-proton damage. People do enjoy this. I don't have it myself. I've never played with it on the live server, but I know that it is something that quite a few people are very fond of. So with this bundle, given the D7 and the Constitution and that Sentry mode, I'm going to put this in the S tier because the D7 especially and that trait it has are, just really important. And also that Constitution, that is really desirable to a lot of people. Next up is the Faith of the Heart bundle. This has the NX-01 refit, the Zindi Sistris, and Elachi Seyteth in it. So looking at the stats here, the reason that I ranked this so poorly in the 22 tier list, I put it in D tier, and the reason I'm going to do the same this year is because for 150 bucks, which is what this bundle is going to cost you, this isn't worth the money. The NX Escort refit, the Elachi Seyteth, and the Zindi Reptilian, yes, you can put a build together on them that will still be able to do a million DPS if you really wanted, but the value just isn't there. You can pick up the Atlantis in the Zen store. That is one of the best escorts in the entire game right now, and it's 30 bucks, and it is going to outperform the NX, it's going to outperform the Seyteth, and it's going to outperform the Sistris. It's not even a competition there. Now, the other thing too is the NX has a legendary version in the 10th bundle, the legendary Columbia Temporal Operative Escort, and you could argue that that is a better NX also. And the thing with that is that legendary version is going to have the accessories, the trait and console this refit has. So any potential value from the refit is gone if you have the 10th bundle. So just given how poorly the ships in this bundle have aged and that the accessories are available elsewhere, this bundle is going into D tier. Next up is the Fighter Pilot Choice Pack, which has the Deimos Pilot Destroyer, the Lost Serena Heavy Raider, the Quadrant Pilot Frigate, and the Undine Chirax Bio Warship. The ships in this bundle are of a higher quality than what we've seen in some of the other bundles, especially Faith of the Heart. You're looking at a Commander Pilot plus Lieutenant Commander Intel combo on 3 of these ships. And for the Quajan, that has a Commander Pilot plus Lieutenant Command. Lieutenant Command, again, is basically irrelevant. So you've got some pretty good ships in here, and they also happen to have some notable accessories. The Lost Serena has a console on it that will let you summon in 9 duplicate photonic copies of the Lost Serena, and you can use that on any ship. So if you're looking to do a summons build, that may be of interest to you. The Deimos, of course, has the Immolating Phaser Lance, which most of you probably know. This has a passive for plus 15.8% phaser damage, some shield pen, and it has a phaser lance built into it, which does a good bit of damage. This is really good to use alongside Universal Designs. There are other consoles you can use nowadays to keep UD up, like the Vovin and the Crystal Prism, but this is one of the best options out there if you're also looking to get some damage out of the console. So you've got a couple of good ships in here and some notable accessories. The Undine Chirax also happens to have a trait that, in theory, could be good for some supported runs, but in reality, as someone that does supported runs, none of us ever use the trait. So, basically the Deimos and La Serena should be your first two picks here. And then for the third, you pick between the Quadrant and the Undine Chirax, whichever suits you best. Now for the tier list here, this bundle is going to go into A tier because the Immolating Phase Lance is pretty good. The ships are good. It's a bundle that I can recommend, but it's not one that I can necessarily recommend everyone needs to go out and pick up. And next up is Mud's Forged Alliance bundle. So every other bundle so far has been composed of Lobby, Lockbox, and promo ships. This bundle is not. These are all event ships, and they are from before the mentality shift we've seen in the past year or two, in which Cryptic decided to start making event ships good. So these are from before that mentality shift, meaning that the stats on these are subpar to the C-Store offerings. So again, these three ships are going to set you back $150, and they're not worth it. Lieutenant Commander Command for two of them, and then Jirok has Lieutenant Commander Temporal plus Ensign Command. There's many different C-Store ships you can get that are going to be better than these. The only reason to take a look at this bundle would be if you're looking at the accessories the ships have. For instance, the Jirok has a console called Sensor Suspension Burst, which is pretty good for Hangar Pet builds. But is that worth $150? I don't think so. So ultimately, there's probably someone out there that would be willing to go and spend that type of money for that console, but I can't recommend this bundle, and I don't want to support, and I don't want to see anyone support the old event ships being made available again through Mud's bundles. They need to be available on their own, either as standalone ships in the Mud store or via the Epic Phoenix store. Next up is the Mud is in Command bundle. So this has the Section 31 Command Heavy Battlecruiser, the Alachi Cheshire Command Dreadnought, the Sona Command Heavy Science Vessel, and the Voth Rampart Command Carrier in it. This is truly a very solid bundle. The Section 31 Command Heavy Battlecruiser is a very good ship. The Alachi Cheshire is certainly the weakest of the group here, with just a Lieutenant Commander spec seat. The Sona Command Science Vessel is decent, and it does have a trait that will appeal to some of you, kick them while they're down. This trait is going to work with a ton of control abilities on your build and will net you up to a 25% crit chance if you properly use it. And then the Voth Rampart, that's a pretty decent tank platform actually, and that's also a really good carrier platform. So you've got some good Torp ships in here, some good tank platforms. Just all around, it's a solid bundle. And the Voth Rampart also happens to have a trait on it, which is good for some pet builds. So it is a pretty good bundle all around. And for the tier list here, I'm gonna put this one in A tier because the ships in here are good. There's some good accessories. And again, if I was going through and picking this, I would go for the Section 31, the Voth Rampart, and the Sona ship. I think those three do offer a pretty good value for your money. And next up is the Muds Into Darkness and Beyond bundle. So this has the Kelvin Intel Dreadnought, the Kelvin Vengeance. Then you have Kelvin Pack 1, which is 3 ships in one selection, the Kelvin Constitution, the D4X, and Tularu. Kelvin Pack 2 is 2 ships in one selection, the Kelvin Einstein and the Kelvin D7. And then you have the Vulcan Scout Vessel. So heading over to the stats, the Vengeance is obviously a really good ship. I think most of us know that is just still to this day like the best Lowy ship in the game. So the Vengeance would most certainly be a pick for most of you. Then for the Kelvin Einstein and D7, these are bundled together because they have the exact same stats. Now, I think that the stats and the accessories on these aren't necessarily that crazy nowadays, so unless there's a specific thing that is pulling you towards those ships, I probably would skip them. The Kelvin Pack 1, which has the D4X, the Tolaru, and the Kelvin Constitution, That's a good one to go for. I would go for that one for sure. So the Vengeance, the Kelvin 3-pack, and then probably the Vulcan Experimental Scout Vessel. I know most people don't care about the size ships, but the Vulcan Scout Vessel here unlocks the quad micro Kelvin torpedoes, and you can reclaim them as many times as you want. And these are just reskins of the Kelvin torpedoes. They're not really that special damage wise, but if you're looking to do a theme build with the Kelvin stuff, it is nice to have those on account wide unlock. And you can reclaim them as many times as you want again. You can put 5 of them on the front of your ship if you were wanting to do a meme build. Now, for the 3 ships that are bundled together, these do have different stats, and they're all pretty good, to be honest. There are better ships in the current meta. The D4X, especially, is going to be the weakest of the 3 here, but they're all still capable. The Talaru is what I was using for some solo runs a couple weeks ago. It was pretty good for that. And the Kelvin Constitution Heavy Command Cruiser, if you don't care about having pets, then that is still a good tank platform, though it does fall behind the meta platforms like the Friendship and the Voth Rampart, because those 2 hangar bays in higher performance environments do have quite a bit of an impact. But if you don't care about that, then the Kelvin Constitution would be a perfectly fine tank. And as for the tier list, I'm going to put this bundle in A tier. Previously in the 2022 video, it was S tier. But the reality is we're starting to see some of these ships age out a little bit. There's newer options that are going to have better spec combos. It's still a good bundle, especially if you're into all the Kelvin stuff, but I don't think it is quite worthy of the blanket recommendation that S tier provides. Next up is Mud's Lost in the Delta Quadrant bundle. This features the Vodwar Juggernaut, Crenum Imperium Warship, Undine Kawavi, and the Hazari Destroyer. So heading over to some stats here. The Hazari Destroyer, that's always been a joke, and it still is. The Undine Kawavi, this was a really good tank platform 2 years ago. It is still good today, but the issue is the tanking meta has shifted over to incorporating Type 7s onto the build, so you really want to have hangar base slots on the higher performing tanks. It's still possible to tank without that, like I said, for the Kelvin Constitution, but if you can get hangar bays on your tank, that is going to be ideal. So if you have access to the Voth Rampart or the Friendship, those are going to be better tank platforms than the Kawavi, but the Kawavi would still work if that's what you have. The Crenum Imperium Warship, I feel like this ship has aged out and isn't really worth considering anymore. The Vodwar Juggernaut is still really good, but you have to keep in mind the Legendary Avenger is available for half the price of this Muds bundle, and is basically going to get very close to its performance. In fact, if you look at the DPS runs right now, most of them are being set with the Legendary Avenger, and everyone doing those runs, you know, we've got both of these ships, but we're going with the Legendary Avenger because the maneuverability is just so much better on this thing. So if you're looking for that Merc Worker Intel combo, the Vodwar Juggernaut's, you know, the best there technically, but because of the maneuverability that the Legendary Avenger has, you're probably going to want to go for that instead. But honestly, you may not want to go for either. The Atlantis Temporal Destroyer is $30 in the Zen store, and that Temporal Intel combo that has, that's really, really powerful in the current Unconvoven meta. And especially if you're doing hug runs or just channel runs, having a bunch of uncons is going to be much more beneficial than that Miracle Worker seeding. So, given the competition that the Vodwar Juggernaut now faces, and the fact that some of the other ships in this bundle have started to fall off a bit due to their age, I'm going to put this in B tier. That's probably going to be surprising to a few of you, but you know, the Vodwar Juggernaut, it's still really good, but when the Legendary Avenger is half the price during a sale, I just can't recommend you go for the Vod Jug over the Legendary Avenger. And next up is the Muds Out of This Wormhole bundle, and I think we can all say a yikes for timing with this one having the Quark Marauder in there. We just got a giveaway on PC, and consoles getting it the week after this video goes live for a free gold Grand Nagus Marauder, which happens to be a better version of the ship that you're getting in this bundle. So really bad timing there. The Jem'Hadar Strike ship also has a legendary version, so its value is basically zero at this point. And the Maquis Raider is the only thing here actually of value, and it's not even for the ship itself. It's for the accessory it has, which is the Badlands console. Basically, that yellow tornado ability you see in any match that is a science player, it's the Maquis console. So if you do lots of EPG builds and you want to have that account wide, then going for the bundle, might make sense. But given that the other two ship options here are going to have reduced value, you're going to probably end up picking some of the secondary items like the DS9 bridge officers, which honestly aren't that good. And after that, yeah, I just don't know what to tell you to pick for the other stuff. So it's a rough value. You have to really be wanting the Maquis Raider account wide to go for this bundle at this point. So I'm going to put this bundle in C tier because that console is still really good for EPG, but that is like the only ship in there worth talking about right now. And next up is the primary faction Muds bundle. This has the Crossfield class Science Spearhead, the original, not the refit. This is not the one that has universal designs, unfortunately. Then we have the Sarcophagus class Dreadnought Carrier, the Delkina, and the Jem'Hadar Recon ship. The Jem'Hadar Recon ship runs into the same issue as the Strike ship in that there's a legendary version of it in the Zen store, so there's pretty much no value to it here. For the Crossfield, there's the legendary version in the 10th bundle, so that's also reduced value. The Delkina, that is a ship that I think is still really good to this day. The Delkina is one of my favorite ships in the entire game. I think it's one of the best ships in the game. But, is it worth spending $150 to get that and the sarcophagus? It starts to become a bit questionable when you look at the other options we have in the Zen store now and where the meta is going. I still think the Delkina is going to be, a great platform for a very long time, but you can get some alternative options at a cheaper price point if you don't want to spend this type of money. The Fleet Norway is a fleet ship that it's a bit weaker than the Delkina, but you're getting that commander command and still an intel seat of some sort. With that command, you can run suppression barrage to increase your survivability. But if you're looking to ramp up more damage, the Atlantis or the Mere Angle, again, for going into a public environment or a channel run environment, with the uncon situation going on right now, you're probably going to have a higher number out of either of these two ships than the Delkina in those environments if you're looking for the max number. But I think the Delkina strikes a nice balance for damage output and survivability because you can easily run Suppression Barrage 1 on it. You've got the Cloak on it and the Singularity abilities, which some people don't understand and they don't like, but they are quite beneficial in some situations. So, depending on what you're going into, there is alternatives for escorts nowadays, but the Delkina, it still is one of the best ships in the game, and I think it's going to hold that for a very long time. As for the sarcophagus, it's a bit weaker with its setup. It is a pretty dated bridge officer spec combo, a lieutenant commander command, plus an ensign miracle worker. That is not really that impressive, but this is a ship that some people do still enjoy. It has 2 hangar bays on it. It has a battle cloak. It's a big ship and a bit of a pig to fly with a turn rate of 4. But the other thing of note from it is the Honored Dead trait. This isn't a must-have, but it is a survivability trait out there that some people do like to run. So if you're looking to get that on account-wide unlock, then getting the sarcophagus would be a good idea here. Now for this bundle, if I was getting it, I'd go Delkina, sarcophagus, and probably 50 master keys. And as for where I'm going to put this bundle in the tier list, it pains me to put it as low as I am, but I'm gonna go B tier. The Delkina is still really good, and the Sarcophagus, has some value. But two of the ships in that bundle do have legendary versions. So if you go for it, I think you're going to be looking at one of the consumable options for your third pick. Next up is the Secret Intel Bundle. So this has the Section 31 Intel Science Destroyer, Sona Intel Battlecruiser, Elachi Sheshar Intel Dreadnought Cruiser, and the Nikwej Intel Battlecruiser. So looking at the stats here, honestly, you're not buying any of these ships for the ships themselves or their stats. The Nikwej is one of the few ships in the game that does have 6 bridge officers, and it gets that by having 2 ensigns instead of a lieutenant there. That is the trade-off. The Elachi Sheshar, for the Intel one and the Command one, it does suck that those don't have a full commander spec seat, so that is a bit limited there. But, really the point of getting this bundle is the traits. You've got Ceaseless Momentum, which is a really nice torpedo trait, and that is coming off of the Nikwej. With the Sona Intel Battlecruiser, you're getting Subspatial Warheads, which is a core trait for building a torpedo build. And then with the Section 31, you're getting Exodus Active Probat, which doesn't see as much use nowadays, but when you use this with Intel Team, it gives you a huge amount of stealth. So you're getting some pretty good traits from this that are pretty much catered to some parts of the Torp meta. So if you're looking to set up Torp builds on a bunch of characters, this would be a bundle to go and take a look at. But as for, its relevance and how I'm going to put it in the tier list here, that is a niche situation. This is not a bundle I'm going to go out and recommend to everyone. So I'm going to put this one into B tier. It's not bad, but you're getting it for those traits to get on a bunch of characters. You're not getting it for the ships. Next up is the MUD's Soul System Defense Pack, and this has the Saturn Intel Science Spearhead, the United Earth Defense Force Vessel, and the Mars Pilot Escort. So for this bundle, these ships aren't bad, but like I said in the initial breakdown for this bundle a couple months ago, if this bundle had dropped 2 years ago, people would have been all over it. But nowadays, these ships just have aged out a bit. The Mars, if you look back to the Fighter Pilot Choice Pack bundle, those had a Commander Pilot plus Lieutenant Commander Intel. The Mars here drops down to a Lieutenant Intel. The United Earth Defense Force vessel, it is still pretty unique with how it's set up, but nowadays the Torp meta has moved over to the Terran Eagle, a Zen Store ship. And for the Saturn, that honestly was never really that good. The console off of it is extremely niche, and for a part of the Torp meta, just overall, this is a bundle that just came in too late for these ships to have much of an impact for those of us looking at the MUDs bundles. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one into C tier. Again, if it had come out a couple years earlier, would have been much higher, but this year just doesn't hold the same level of value it did. And the final MUDs bundle is MUD Stealing Time. So this has the Amari, the Temporal Science Vessels, and Temporal Destroyers. For the Science Vessels and Destroyers, these have multiple ships in those selections. There's the Fed, KDF, and ROM versions of those ships. The stats of them is the exact same, but they are 3 different ships, and that is 3 different Admiralty cards you're getting there. So that is 3 Science Admiralty cards of note too. And for the actual ship stats here, let's take a look. The Amari hasn't aged the best. It's still pretty capable, but it's certainly not the best platform out there. With the Amari, the console from it was unbound a while back, and we've tried it on Torp builds. It does not that great, to be honest. So, I mean, really, this is just a ship. If you're interested in the design of it, then go for it. But performance-wise, not really a need to nowadays. For the Temporal Destroyers, performance-wise, the Atlantis is a better platform in the Zen Store. but there is still a reason to go for these temporal destroyers. They have a console called the Enhanced Mannheim Device, and this is not going to matter for most of you, but if you're interested in summons builds, this does summon a future and past duplicate of your ship, and it is pretty interesting, especially when you're flying around with a bigger ship. So I'm in the Valkys right now, which is the Romulan Enterprise J variant, and when I use this console, you see it's given, two duplicates of my ship there. So it is a pretty fun console to use. It's not necessarily the best performer, but it is fun. And for the temporal science vessel, the Vern has been known for a long time as, like one of the top, if not the best science ship you can get in the entire game. It is still very, very good, but there are alternatives that are matching or beating it, such as the Lucari Junior Scout ship, which is a fleet ship. That has actually taken some records away from the Vern, but the Vern, I think in the right situation could probably take them back. So the Vern is still a capable side platform for EPG stuff. It's just that there are other options out there. You don't have to use the Vern nowadays. But the Vern does also have an interesting console on it. So let me show you that here. That is going to be the Tippler console. Here it is, enhanced Tippler cylinder. Passives are plus 15% exotic damage and then some shield restoration. But the point of this is the console is going to move you backwards. You're going to be untargetable and held for 7 seconds while it does its rewind. And then it's going to give you a bunch of cooldown reduction and also some healing. So let me show you that. If you hit that while the Mannheim console is on, it's also going to do a bubble and freeze everything around you. So it'll hold foes that are within that bubble. And by doing that, you get some cooldown reduction. So it's a good console to have access to. But, for a lot of people, Vovin accomplishes the same thing. And what you just saw there is also a common fun feature of this console is it will repeat the animation at a random point after you've used the console. So you'll be flying along and then the animation will start over. Really, really fun feature there. But it is again a console worth having on hand. It does come in handy for some science builds, and it does work alongside Vovin. So overall for stealing time, I can't put it in S tier anymore because the Vern does have competition, and I just don't think it's a bundle that I can just recommend everyone should pick up. But I think it still deserves to be an A tier because it is still a pretty solid bundle. And that is my tier list of all 19 MUDs bundles currently in Star Trek Online. So to summarize, at S tier, these are the best of the best bundles. They're the easiest for me to recommend. These are Disco Inferno and the Choice Pack of Dread Through the Ages. Both of those have a really good value right now. Moving down to A tier, these bundles are still really good, but not something that everyone needs to have. So that's the Into Darkness and Beyond bundle, Stealing Time, In Command, and the Fighter Pilot Pack. Moving down to B tier, the value here starts to become a bit more niche. It's going to be tailored more to a specific playstyle. So you've got Secret Intel, Primary Faction, Cruiserweight, Carried Away, Awesome Mix Volume 1, and Lost in the Delta Quadrant. And down at C tier, these bundles are not necessarily bad, but they're not the best way for you to spend $150 in this game. You've got Soul System Defense, Out of This Wormhole, which again has taken a big hit with the free gold Naga ship we just got. Choice Pack of Dread, as seen on TNG, and the 32nd Century Legacy Choice Pack. And down at D tier, these are the bundles that I recommend against going for. I think you should absolutely not spend your money on them. That is Forged Alliance, which is a bundle full of event ships, not even Lobby, Promo, and Lockbox. And then you have Faith of the Heart, which is just full of a bunch of old, outdated ships. So I'm sure someone's going to disagree with my placements for some bundles here. Again, This is placements based on my opinion, based on where I view the current meta and how the ships and items from these bundles fall into it. And that's going to be it for today. Let me know down below in the comments if this video changed your mind on any of the bundles. And of course, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. See you guys around.